And Representative Roch, tell me, it seems like this was supposed to start at noon today. Here we are approaching 2 o'clock. It's not happening. What have you heard about any movement on any type of solution?
Well, I think the barriers to getting a budget are no different today than they were at the end of the regular session just a week ago. There are primarily two schools of thought. One is that the state government's spending desires aren't supported by our current revenue. We better raise that revenue. Now, that's what some people are saying. There's another school of thought, and that's where some of my colleagues and I agree and say, well, rather than trying to raise revenue to meet the spending demands, bring the spending demands down to where we already have money to pay for those items. I don't think that things have changed tremendously since the end of the regular session, and that's why the delay today, because they're still trying to convince people that raising taxes in a tough economy on working New Mexico families is a good idea, and I don't think it is a good idea.
And I guess on the flip side of that question, we understand the feeling of cutting the state budgets and so forth. But during this debate, Representative Egoff asked, and I think he posed it to folks on this side of the aisle, name what state agency you want to cut or name what employees you want to lay off. Do you feel it's a question like that, or how do you feel the question is?
It's interesting because the questions that are asked like that don't take into account the fact that Republicans have put forth lots of cost-saving measures, and they all get tabled in the Rules Committee. I myself had a bill to suspend expenditures on the Space Board because New Mexico voters pretty much understand that we have to fund essential services first. You don't cut education and public safety and roads and continue funding projects such as the Spaceport and the Rail Runner, which the media has shown has been losing money. But that's not the idea here, and so when we put forth cost-saving measures and they never make it out of committee, then whose fault really is it for not cutting the budget appropriately?
And an issue that's going to be coming up again, it was controversial in the Senate and here in the House too, is expanding the food tax, adding more foods to it and so forth. How do you feel about that possibility?
Well, I think the possibility scares a lot of working New Mexico families. The costs of taxes across the board are high anyway in New Mexico, and now we're going to try to raise taxes on food items that they have to survive in their family. It's a bad idea. In addition, during the regular session, when the food tax was proposed, it was proposed as a mandate from the state. Well, this proposal that we're hearing about in this special session is a little bit more devious. It says, oh no, we're not going to propose the food tax. We're just going to remove the provision that maintains funding for the cities and the counties, and we'll let the cities raise the taxes and make City Hall the bad guy rather than the folks up here. I think voters are smart enough to figure out that when the taxes are raised, it's the folks here that are doing it. And so we stand opposed to all tax increases on working families.
Gut feeling, are we going to get out of here anytime soon with a budget deal? And well, if we do win?
I think we'd like to see it over as quickly as possible. Every day of the session costs $50,000. That right there is one full-time teacher for a year in a New Mexico school district. And so we can't afford to sit up here and waste more taxpayer dollars. We need to get down to the responsibility that we've been given as legislators and get the job done.
Is it going to get done?
I believe it is going to get done, but it may have to be revisited again after the new revenue projections come in later this spring and maybe again in the fall. But I think we will have some kind of a deal worked out here today, or not today, but this week, and I'm hopeful that it protects families and protects the taxpayers.
That is Representative Steinborn. The session we thought would start at noon, and it hasn't started yet. It's delayed, and we hear there's going to be more caucus talk and so forth. And so I guess the question is, how's it coming? Are we closer to getting a budget deal?
Sounds like there is a framework of an understanding between the House leadership and the Senate leadership. I think the process we're in now is they're trying to get the buy-in, obviously, the caucuses, and I'm sure that's what the Senate's doing as well.
And so do we think that that'll get movement, or do the same factions that were there at the end of this regular session, are they still there?
There's definitely folks who philosophically agree and disagree with different components of the package. I think we still see that. And of course, in a democracy, it doesn't take 100% agreement to get something done. So where we're going to end up, I don't think that's certain yet. There's still candidly disagreement among some of the parts of this, but there's a lot of agreement as well. So it's hard to say right now. We're doing, I think, as people would expect, which is duking it out over the details. So.
And so, will that duking out continue? You think for how long?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? How long? Or the $50,000 a day question is probably a better way to put it. It's hard to say, whether or not we're able to wrap this up within a couple days, or whether it takes, frankly, a little longer than that. I think it's important we get it right. With our education at stake and our healthcare system at stake for neediest New Mexicans, people's tax liabilities at stake. It's important that we get the right balance here when we balance our budget. So whether it takes a day or a couple days, it's hard to say.
And so another thing that's been brought up is again expanding the food tax and taxing certain foods. How do you feel about that? And how do you feel what chances do you feel it has moving through the legislature?
Hard to say. Me personally, I don't like the idea of doing that. And I've kind of publicly stated that already, and I stated that prior to the session, regular 30-day session beginning. I just think it's kind of a bad way to go. They're looking at some creative ways of maybe doing that. So whether or not, again, there's enough support from the body to pass it, we'll just have to see.